Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of ATDC Radio, and this is going to be a fun one. I have with me today the founders of MapHabit, Matt Golden and Stuart Zola. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, let's kick it off with Stuart. Stuart, tell us about MapHabit. How are you serving folks?
Well, MapHabit is a system that is aimed at helping individuals who have memory problems, as well as their caregivers. And these are individuals who could suffer from various kinds of dementia, for example, Alzheimer's disease, and have difficulty remembering things. MapHabit provides them a mechanism by using a series of visual maps that lay out for them step-by-step activities of daily living and helps them to both schedule and get through those activities successfully, and helps to reduce some of the burden on caregivers by helping the patient, the individual with the condition, become more independent.
Now, what was the genesis of the idea?
The genesis of the idea actually came both from Matt and from me. We are actually neighbors. We live on the same street.
Neighbors, just live in the same neighborhood. So you're just randomly
three
placed.
doors down.
Just a couple of doors down from each other. And in fact, we did not talk to each other for about 8 or 9 years.
And that was after you got to know each other, or that was before you knew each other?
I'll do the jokes around here, but that's very good. No, we're casual neighbors, but we never really had too much of a conversation until just about a year and a half ago, when we discovered we each have a kind of passion for trying to help individuals with this condition because of our own personal experiences. And Matt can say something about his. With mine, it was my mother who had a stroke and had, in the latter part of her life, she was in her 90s, but she then suffered from dementia as a result of that. And the question always was, how could we make things better for those individuals? My background is in neuroscience and Alzheimer's disease and memory, and so that was a naturally occurring kind of quandary for me all the time. Met Matt, and he had another skill set, and we actually brought the two things to the table together and began to develop MapHabit.
So, Matt, tell us about your background a little bit.
Yeah, so in terms of the genesis of MapHabit, my grandma from an early age showed signs of, forgetting things and having.
Like how early?
I can only remember about since I was 4 or 5, but really that early. And she, she was funny and comical. I probably didn't know what a grandma was actually supposed to act like, but
it seemed grandmotherly.
It seemed grandmotherly, but just looking back now and knowing what I know, there certainly were some abnormalities.
And that's something important for the listener to know, that these issues can kind of reveal themselves at a much younger age than, like, they don't have to be 90 years old for this to at least see some clues.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, as you may have seen in the paper today, the great study that has just come out reveals that the start of Alzheimer's, we now understand, happens about 30 to 35 years before you even see some of the memory problems. The brain is already changing in the course of this disease, so you begin to see things earlier than you otherwise might suppose. And you never think much of those things until much later when there's a diagnosis and you say, oh, yeah.
So you start connecting the dots. Right. But it isn't like a common misconception, or you tell me if this is true. It's not like, oh, I forgot my keys. That may or may not be.
Forgetting your keys usually is not anything to worry about. Forgetting what the keys are for, or
right,
what the keys do, that's a different story.
Right. So it's that kind of really big disconnects where there could be problems.
Yes.
Yeah. And in terms of just continuing my story, so my grandma was one example. The more impactful one was my uncle, who actually in his late 50s got early onset Alzheimer's. The chances of that happening are very slim. Most of the cases are, 75 to 84 years old. But he was a big mentor in my life, and he got me into computers and business. Had other influences as well, but just knowing him and the kind of person he was, and how that changed over time, how it affected his wife and also his direct family and even our family. It just made a big impact on.
How
on
old
me.
were you during that window of time?
I was 26, 27 years old. Yeah.
So you saw it. So
I was very aware of what was
Right.
happening, and it happened quick. Within four years, I think he unfortunately passed. But that just grew a fire inside of me where I just want to give back and help other people. And I was at a point in my career where I was doing a lot of consulting, and it was exciting, but I wanted to do something new to make it fresh. And that's when Stu was saying we just serendipitously ran into each other and started talking about this. I said, wow, this really could help people, because there's nothing out there that is like what MapHabit can provide.
So how did this serendipitous meeting occur? Was it like a pool party?
It was just a neighborhood. It was
A neighborhood
we live in a
cookout or
cul-de-sac,
something?
and this was a neighborhood gathering where we had a chance.
Right. So then,
talk
but
with
you
each
had been
other.
neighbors for like almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And then, so you were like avoiding each other, or just saying hi
No,
politely?
it's just you know how it is on neighborhoods. Some people you're friendly with, other people you're less.
Right. But
less
did you even know what he did?
Not exactly. I knew he was associated with Emory, and I went to Emory as well. So
You had that bond.
we had that bond, but I was, maybe a little intimidated or scared.
He's kind of a scary guy.
I don't know why we never brought it up ahead of time, but
Right. So then you're at this get together, and then so what was the kind of the trigger that at least started the conversation? Was it one of your
It's
family
like anything
members?
else, it's stories. Stories are important in
Right.
people's lives, and we were telling each other our stories. And it turned out we began to resonate with this idea about our common history and how could we do something. We had talked about various possibilities. This idea of having these visual maps, I had developed some techniques for doing these things called mind mapping. It's just a visual way of thinking, and I use that in my courses. And I thought that maybe we could use these kinds of visual maps to help individuals. I didn't know quite how to go about that, but it turned out Matt did, because he was an IT background and other kinds of things that he would bring to the table. So together we actually created the plan for MapHabit to develop ways that we could illustrate for individuals the steps they needed, help them create the habit for those steps through routine and repetition. And that's the framework for MapHabit as it now exists.
Now, is the framework the same framework would as an individual without the memory issues wanting to create a good habit?
That's a terrific point, Lee, and absolutely the answer is yes. The earlier you start with these habits, the more preserved they will be for later in life. And not only that, we know how hard it is to break a habit. If you try to stop smoking or try to stop eating, not as well as you should, you know how difficult it is, because those are long embedded kinds of behaviors. So what we try to do is create those long embedded kinds of behaviors, or take advantage of components that are already there, to help develop the habit to get them through their activities of daily living, whether it's getting dressed or bathing or other things.
Now, does the same? I read a book a while ago about habits, and there was like a trigger or a cue, where there was like a few aspects to a habit. Is that the same thing in these situations as well?
Absolutely, exactly that. And we try to use this kind of cycle of reinforcement for the habit, getting the repetition of the habit to have people complete the task. They get a reinforcement through some kind of music that they like, or pictures that they like, other kinds of things, to help them repeat the activity again and again.
Even though these are going to be activities that they had done historically in their whole life, kind of without thinking. And then as the disease progresses, it becomes like those kind of connections get harder to connect the dots for the individual, and then they miss steps, and then they can't do it anymore?
We know now that there are two kinds of memory systems in the brain. The memory system that is affected majorly in Alzheimer's disease is this everyday memory kind of system, has particular structures in the brain. But there's another system that is preserved that doesn't develop the plaques and tangles that you hear about from Alzheimer's disease till much longer into the disease. And that's the habit system. That's the system involved with motor skills and habits and routine. And that's preserved for a much longer time. So we try to take advantage of that intact system to help people continue to utilize the habit part of the brain so they can accomplish these things independently.
So now, so you have the concept, and then at some point, Matt, you start building some tech around it?
Exactly, yeah. So it is a system. So we're starting with a mobile app that has different logins for the person with the impaired memory. We have a login for the care provider, a caregiver. Also,
so now they got to know
members.
what password you're asking this person.
Well, that's the nice part about technology. It's always evolving in our benefit. So we have facial recognition and biometrics with your thumb. So certainly the facial recognition for someone with this kind of condition is going to be the most important.
What about like kind of a voice thing like the Alexa or something where they can have a voice trigger?
Yes. So the MapHabit system is actually 4 types of modalities. One of them is the mobile app. The other one, the next one is a paper-based printout. So you're probably thinking, how is someone who's never used a smartphone before,
right,
maybe a little resistant to technology, going to all of a sudden start using it? Well, the answer is they don't necessarily have to, even though some actually do want to learn and use technology and mimic what their families are doing. We have the ability to print these out for them and put them strategically at points of the house or points in their life that they would use them. So there's the mobile app, the paper-based, there's the smart devices, as you alluded to. Amazon Alexa will prompt people when activities are supposed to start. They also provide the person to ask a question when they're supposed to do something. So not only for the Alexa, but also for the watch. Those are mainly the main types of ways to interact with it.
And then what type of routine does this work best with for the individual, the senior?
Well, the routines that work best are things that are referred to as activities of daily living. These are standardized routines in the behavioral community. Things like getting dressed, brushing your teeth, showering, toileting. All of those things are important things that the individuals have to accomplish every day, and which for individuals become challenging to do, and to do in the right order, to do at the right time. Taking their medications is another one. So having a reminder to be able to do that, having pictures of what the pill is to make sure they're taking the right pill, not the wrong pill,
at the right time.
Pills at the right time. All of those things are built into the system. The caregiver is alerted, for example, if the individual has not taken their medications for a period of time, then the caregiver gets an alert and knows. There are other things built in that Matt was alluding to as well, things like geo-tracking. So when they're wearing their watch, we know where the individual is. Do they go outside a certain geographical area? Can we find them? Those are all important pieces. Now,
is this for, I know that the senior is going to use it, but is the customer the family member, or is it the facility that the person's at? Like, who is the customer for this?
So the customer for this, in principle, is the individual patient who has this condition, as well as the caregivers, the family. But we are also involved with facilities where adult care and maintenance is done. So it's open to a wide range of possibilities. Probably Matt is the person to explain that better.
Yeah. The adult living communities that have the continuum of care from independent to assisted living through memory care. Hospital systems will greatly benefit from this as well. Just imagine someone's been admitted for a fall. They go in there, they actually get a diagnosis, and they have Alzheimer's. So what we will have as part of kind of the outpatient processing is the hospital would give this to their individual to one, ensure their safety and make sure that they are doing all the things that they're supposed to be doing. It benefits them because it reduces readmissions. It increases the adherence to medications, which will help the individual as well. It'll also increase the efficiency of the hospital staff in that people will be more compliant and miss less appointments. And what Stu was also mentioning before with having the watch on, there's a lot of things that the watch can capture, such as, heart rate, your sleep quality, your activity level. And with the thousands of users that we will have on the system, we will be able to aggregate that information, put it into an AI deep learning model, and create a what's called a neural network to basically predict health outcomes before they happen. And we think that will greatly benefit not only hospital systems, families, but even the government, Medicare, so they can reduce the overall costs.
So walk me through what's actually going to happen for my dad, who's 85 and showing symptoms of this, and my family members that are all paying attention to this, but he's living, say by himself. What happens? So I say, okay, I'm in. Hook me up with the MapHabit system. So what occurs now?
Well, we would identify who is going to be the caregiver or
caregivers. The primary caregiver.
Person who's going to take
care so it's going to be my sister, and then let's work on one of these things. Say, showering.
Yeah.
Or you tell me what's the low-hanging fruit? What's the basic?
The first thing is to identify who the caregiver is. Then we would train the caregiver. There's a brief training program to allow them to use the maps, how they set up the maps. The maps can be set up and personalized in important ways. So depending on, for example, the level of impairment that the individual has.
Because it has to be flexed because it's going to get worse.
It's going to change.
It's going to
change over time. So MapHabit is designed with that kind of dynamic flexibility so that it can change. And the person who knows that best is your sister in this case, because she knows.
She's there every day,
all the time. So she can reshape the maps accordingly with, you need a lot of steps to describe this activity. You need only a few steps to describe that activity. She can provide pictures, take pictures in your own house of the environment so that becomes the pictures on the map, the shower, the scene, the bathroom, wherever it is. So those maps are created by your sister then, and then at the time that's appropriate, and when the individual wakes up or a few minutes afterwards, the first map shows up and shows what the individual should do, brushing your teeth or taking a shower.
So how does it show up to my dad?
It will be on an iPad, or, again, if the individual is less techno-savvy, it will be on a sheet that is hung with the pictures showing the steps that need to be taken to take a shower.
So then next to his bed, if we know that he always gets up on the right side because people are creatures of habit. Mm-hmm. So then the thing is like right in his face or somewhere nearby.
Essentially exactly that, right.
And then that gets him to the second. It's like a treasure hunt.
Yeah,
right.
It's step by step.
It's a step by step.
He shows that he's completed that. The next map comes up and says, now it's time to get dressed. And you'll have a sequence of clothing that possibly your sister will have already laid out or can choose. And you get through the day's activities exactly that way, through scheduling, through providing the information the individual needs, and through that routine. So now, what stage is the company at now? Is this out there in the wild, or are you beta users, or?
So we're still developing the application. So for the past 6 or 7 months, we've been doing research with the Atlanta VA Medical Center, with Emory University, and Speak Life Management, which operates one of the largest assisted living communities here in Atlanta. So we've been getting a lot of customer discovery and understanding how people would use it at those different stages of the conditions and different family involvement. So all that's being incorporated into the app. We'll have it ready, the initial what's called minimum viable product in July. We'll be piloting that with a small subset of customers, and we'll eventually be broadening it out to larger businesses and eventually direct to consumer.
Now, are you looking for more kind of test cases? Are you looking for more organizations that'll let you kind of
Oh, absolutely. I think the more information at this point that we can get, and the more types of people in
Using
different types,
it,
it's only going to make our product even more advantageous for people.
Yeah.
Now, is there a competitor in the marketplace, or where are you at in terms of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some competitors. For the most part, those individuals are actually trying to bolster the everyday memory system. To some of us, that is the wrong approach because that's the system that is on the
decline
downward slide.
right.
So instead, we have been focused on this habit system, which is preserved for a longer time and which can sustain behavior for a much longer time. So I think that's a differentiator for us in terms of MapHabit, along with many of the characteristics that we just described. The idea is that the system is really quite flexible and dynamic. It changes as the individual changes. We use multi-modalities. We have information that the individual gets both in the visual modality and the auditory modality, touch. The more kinds of sensory information you can converge on the individual, the better they will remember it, the better they will be able to maintain it. So we do a lot of things that we think set MapHabit aside from other kinds of products.
Now, from the caregiver standpoint, is my sister seeing, if she has the app as well, is she seeing kind of what happened during the day? Like, oh, he skipped 3 steps here, or he didn't brush his teeth, or things like that.
Yeah, so the app is set up so that the caregiver can monitor all of the activities that are going on when those activities happen. Are they happening at the right time? If they skip a step, the caregiver gets notified, and it may be a minor step, so there's nothing much you want to do, or it may be something more important, and so the caregiver will then know to intervene.
So what's next for you guys? Are you looking for funding? Are you looking... What do you need?
Yeah, we're always looking for funding to help us grow. We've been fortunate that friends and family have gotten us to this point, and we're actually well positioned through the end of the summer, and we'll be in revenue during the summer. So we're currently definitely looking for partners and potential customers to help us grow.
What's ideal partner?
Well, for example, healthcare systems. So there's a couple of large ones here in the Atlanta area that I think would be great candidates to start using it and seeing how it can benefit them. Other assisted living communities and even insurance providers. So if you look at people who subscribe to like Northwestern Mutual or some of the other insurance companies out there, if they can provide this to their customers, it's basically a dual benefit. It helps the individuals stay independent longer and keeps the families together more, and it gives the insurers a little bit more visibility into how people are progressing.
And we have, just to add to that, one other point is that we have received competitive funding from the Georgia Research Alliance. Georgia is really fortunate to have that organization here. Yeah. So we've received GRA funding to help support the 3 studies that we've carried out. We have an NIH SBIR grant in pending as well, so that we have a lot of other kinds of opportunities to be able to move our research forward and the work forward as well. So.
Now, Matt, you have been involved in startups before?
Yes.
And then Stu, you?
I have as well.
So is this one a different one for you guys, or is this just another adventure?
Each one is an adventure.
Right, but this one has some personal components, and maybe the other ones didn't
all
have.
of the ones I've been involved in have really all been focused on aspects of Alzheimer's disease, dementia, memory impairment. Mm-hmm. So I'm a
one-trick pony.
Exactly.
I'm a little bit different. I've always been entrepreneurial in nature. Right out of school, my job got canceled. I was right at 9/11 happened, so I had to kind of do my own thing, and linked up with a bunch of Emory and Georgia Tech students, and grew that company and had an exit from that company, which was really fortunate. And then started some of the management consulting and doing other IT finance related projects. So So also got into private equity, trying to divert some of my stocks and bond allocations to, some more different types of investments that I can pool together with family and friends. So I've had a number of different types of experiences, but by far this is the most meaningful, the most potentially impactful, just due to the lack of options. And I want a legacy to be known that we've really made an impact to help families and who are going through this horrible time. So,
and if somebody wanted to learn more about MapHabit, what are the coordinates?
It's www.MapHabit.com.
Good stuff. Well, thank you both for sharing your story today.
Thank you. Thanks
well,
for the
before we wrap,
opportunity.
one more thing. How has the ATDC helped you?
ATDC has been absolutely incredible with providing us with resources, opportunities like this with entrepreneurs and catalysts and residents. They have wonderful office space here, incredible companies that come to help us grow, and really just to have a sounding board. You're going through all these different phases and questions and complications. Sure, you have your own network of people, but you can't rely on them on a daily basis. Maybe a question here and there. For me, I know Stu also feels very strongly. It just helps to have people that are dedicated to you on a daily basis. I don't think that we'd be as far as we have if it weren't for ATDC.
And have you been part of ATDC before in any of your other ventures?
No.
First time for both of you?
First time.
Yep.
It's been just a terrific experience.
Good stuff. Well, again, thank you both for sharing your story, and that's MapHabit.com if you're interested in learning more. This is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on ATDC Radio.